key objective of this webinar that we have planned today. So the objective of the webinar is to provide background knowledge on the information security, to gain an overview of the standard ISO IEC 27001, that is Information Security Management System, and its key features and benefits. During these discussions, you will also gain useful tips on information security management system implementation, maintenance, etc. And last but not the least, we'll understand how, if your organization wants to get certified with ISO 27001, then what is the actual process, how do you initiate, and how do you get the certification for your organization. From this I will request my colleague Jason to continue with the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So welcome again to this overview. So let me now discuss. No, so for the session's overview, so we're going to discuss what is information security, and of course the introductions to ISO 27001, which is the latest version of the 27000, is 2013 version. We're going to also discuss together with my colleague the structure of the ISO 27001, some of the requirements, especially from clause 4 to clause 10 will be highlighted, and some controllable objectives and major pillars will also be discussed. Key pictures will be also discussed today. The benefits of the 27001 on what will be the major benefits of this, when you implement the 27, and of course process to get certified. So how we will going, what are those stages that you will going to undergo from implementation up to the certification and up to, of course, releasing a particular certificate. Next slide. So what is information? To this millennium, information is the very, very important and vital, should I say, asset, when it comes to managing it. So information is a data that has been processed for a final user, and information is the outcome of a processed data. Like, for example, if there were, for example, things that you were going to request on, because of course data can always be descriptive or informative. Information is an asset also, which, like other important business assets, oops, there's an error, that can also be used, like, oops.
One second.
Okay.
Sorry for the I'll.
Okay, I think that is slide 10.
Yes.
Okay, so again, it is an asset which other important business assets has a value to an organization, and consequently needs to be suitably protected. And if you can remember, there are certain incidents that is happening around the world, not only in the Philippines. Especially in the Philippines, I for myself have experienced having an additional amount of money in my ATM, and after 30 seconds it becomes again my normal balance. That's why it is very important to always secure those information. Okay, next slide. Next slide.
Yes.
Okay, so why is information an asset? Actually, because of information is recognized as a valuable to the organization, has a certain value. A value that is very important, that when this information can be given to a person that is, for example, not authorized, we say it, not authorized to acquire or to make note of this information, might lead to something that will going to even destroy the company itself because of certain issues. Information is also a commodity, and such as has a monetary value, the value of which depends on its accuracy and potential use. It depends on how important a certain value of that information. That's why even in banks, there are certain confidentiality clause that we will going to follow. Information helps in present and future decisions making based on past trends, market research and analysis, keep an eye on competitors, and comply to regulatory requirements. Actually, even in the Philippines, there are certain laws in the Philippines, especially when it comes to handling of information. There is also a Data Protection Act in the Philippines that is actually in a way is complying to an ISMS requirement. Okay, next slide.
Uh, Jason, I'm unable to hear you.
Okay,
I can
now,
hear him
okay, let's to continue. Information exists in many forms. No, it can be actually a printed document. No, which is very again important. That is why there is certain rules and regulation on how we will going to, for example, um, should I say, retain a particular document. No, it can be written on paper. It can be stored electronically or even cloud. Not transmitted by a post or electronic means. It can also be visual, videos, diagrams, or charts. Can be published on the web, blogs, and social media. Yeah, there's also a verbal or auditory or conversation on phone calls. That's why even in BPO, like for example, for myself, I work with the bank. No, when we transact, from one person from the bank going to another person, especially if there is some transaction that needs to be done through phone banking. No, we call it phone banking. It is always recorded to have an evidence of confirmation from the client. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what is information security? So now we know the importance or definition of information. Now we need to always secure this information because of certain step, no? So information security is what keeps valuable information free of danger. So that's why this information needs to be protected and safe from harm. So how do we do that? No, but of course, when we implement the ISMS, there will be certain controllable objectives that will be required, from us to always secure this information. It is not something you buy; it is something you do. It's a process, not a product. Yes, because as mentioned, there are certain information that can be actually be a process when you are an input process from a certain activity. Next. So why this information is very important to us? No, because protection of information against various threats is very important. As should I say a while ago, this can lead. Oops, what happened? This can lead to, for example, certain information hacking or information theft. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, I'm getting certain errors in between. Jason, please continue. Can you see my screen now?
Okay, I can see your screen now. So
Okay.
again, to continue, ensures business continuity. No, like for example, certain information again, as mentioned, can be an input process to another process by doing business. It minimizes financial losses or other impacts, especially if this information is something that will going to help the organization look forward in growing the business. No, optimizes return on investment. Information can actually be used, for you to be able to analyze on how you will going to look into other investments. It creates opportunity to do business safely and of course maintains privacy and compliance. Next. So there are certain components of information security. So one is integrity, of course, confidentiality and availability. These three items actually needs to be uh, um, should I say give in emphasis, no? Because of course, um, like for example, if it's a confidential information, making information accessible to only to authorized person. No, that is very important. Otherwise, it can be again transferred to wrong hands. Availability is ensuring that information is available when required. No, there are certain information that you really need to be given access, especially if you are the ones doing decisions, if you are the persons who is doing or this information is very important for you to be able to do the next stage. No, and what is now integrity? So how can we say that this certain information is having this type of component? No, safeguarding the accuracy and completeness of information and processing the methods. Next. Actually, the ISO, the International Standardization Organization, have managed to prepare, certain guidelines, and of course, it is now called the ISO 27001. But this organization is the one who have established the ISO. No, so just to give you a short information of ISO, it is a non-governmental organization that was established during 1947 and is actually based in Switzerland, Geneva, and it has 165 national standards. No, institutes from countries in all regions of the world. No, wherein actually Philippines is one country that is a member of this organization. Of course, India and other countries. Next slide. And to mention that because of the vision of the ISO to always adhere to different changing needs and expectations of the customers, or should I say valuable customers, no, they have already developed more than 23,667 standards. You can just imagine the ISO 27001 is only one standard we are actually looking at. No, but there are different type of standards that are very valuable to the entire world because of different situations and changes. Like now, we do have. I remember there is already a standard, should I say, a BS standard for prevention of COVID. It was released last September 2020. So it means this standards is something that will going to develop and make it sustainable. It can be through economic development, it can be environmental, and it can also be a societal. Here are some samples of the standards. Of course, I think most of you know the ISO 9001s, and because maybe some of you I already audited for various from different countries. So some are ISO 14001. The ISO 50001 is an energy management system, and there is also the ISO 22301, which is something that is an extension of the ISO 31000, which is risk assessment, and of course the ISO 27001. Okay, so and of course the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, which is actually represented in US, they are the ones who have managed also to help the ISO to make it an ISO from a BS status, no, which is a British standard status. Okay, next slide. So as you can see, the history of 27001 have evolved since 1992 as a BS code, no, a code of practice for security management. It is actually initiated by the Department of Trade and Industry in London, and they have managed to evolve that to a British Standards Institute, or BSI 7799 during that time, 1995, and it included some revisions again. And after that year, 2000 to 2005, they have managed to issue the first version of 2000 of the 27001, and managed to again improve the requirements of the ISO 27000 to a version which is now that we are now studying, the ISO 27000 2013. Okay, next slide. Okay, I think this particular, okay. So for the ISO 27001, so it is, so to formally define that, no, it is an international standard designed and formulated to create a robust information security management system. No, yes, it for myself, I have managed to see that because of numerous companies that I have audited. No, it is an ISMS is a systematic approach to managing sensitive company information to that it remains secure. No, it is actually specifically stating managing sensitive company information. No, I know all companies have different type of sensitivity when it comes to information. Like for example, if you are coming from a national defense, like a Department of National Defense, such information is very vital. No, it includes people, process, and IT systems by applying a risk management processes. It can also be a comprehensive set of controls that comprises best practices and information security. Okay, it can help small, medium, and large businesses because it is actually applicable to from small business to a large business scale type of organization in any sector. No, as long as there is an information that you need to secure. Okay, next slide. So as you can see, uh, ISO 27001 is a global standard on information security management, no? Because here, this is a very famous management methodology or tool, the plan, do, check, and act that they have managed to follow, no? If we're going to look at it, like for example, if it's something that is undergoing planning, information security incidents, information security aspects of business continuity, compliances, and information security policies are all part of the planning stage. So if you're going to look at the clauses, it is actually clause 4 and clause 6. Now, if we're going to look at the do part of the PDCA, this is an organization of information security. It can also be human resource or asset management, but of course, for a specific clause of the standard, it is pertaining to clause 7 and 8. Now, when it comes to checking, it is under the clause 9 for audits, but there are certain controls that you need to follow, like asset controls, cryptographic, and physical environmental security, which are all enumerated in the annex version or the annex A or normal or of the ISO 27000. So it will also be highlighted by my colleague. Of course, the act portion is something that is under clause 10, no? But there is also the things that you need to also understand, like for example, on checking your own, the things that you are, like for example, there are certain plans and objectives that has not been implemented effectively, and there will be something that you need to correct, and then there will also be an act portion of it for it to be able to correct the things that is not correct implemented initially. Okay. So as you can see, as mentioned a while ago, there are 14 control areas, no? And then there are 14 control objectives, and the 114 control points will also be, this is also part of the Annex A, no? From A5 to I think this is a 17, A18, no? Yeah, it's until A18. Okay, so next slide. Okay, I think this will be now discussed by my colleague for the structure of the 27,001.
Okay, thank you, Jason, for the brief introduction of these webinar and the core concepts of information security. So, as we all now understand what is information, in which all form it exists, what is the importance of ensuring the security of the information, etc. And also introduction to an organization who has developed this security standard, that is an ISO. Let us move on to understanding what is this standard exactly, how it is structured, what all are the various requirements of this standard in an overview, and then we'll move on to the key features and benefits of this standard. So first, I'll initiate with the structure of ISO 27000 2013. Before I actually brief on the structure here, I want to add a point that any ISO standard that you will refer to, the various standard which Jason has already mentioned, like ISO 9001, ISO 27701, ISO 31001, all these standards follow a similar structure. This is the beauty how this the organization ISO has defined these standards. So they follow certain core structure to any ISO standard that helps us understand. If you pick up any standard, that will help you understand how it is structured and then understand the requirement. So the same structure, same type of naming convention, the vocabulary is used across all the ISO standards. With this, I'll start with briefing on the structure of ISO IEC 27001. If you see introduction, scope, normative references, and terms and condition, these are the introductory sections of any ISO standard, which talks about what is the standard and what is the scope or applicability of this standard, the various references to the standard, because each ISO standard refers to the other ISO standards. Okay, and then number 3 is terms and conditions. Post this, we'll move on to the fourth clause of the standard. So usually these particular sections are referred as clauses, wherein I'll be referring it as clause 4, context of the organization. This is the clause wherein standard is asking us to understand what is the organization, what are its products and services, what is the physical location in which it is operating, what are its clients, which all are the internal and external factors which can affect the information security management system of this organization, etc. So the standard first help ask us to start with understanding what is the organization and what are the various parameters from internal and external that can affect the information security of that particular organization. And basis on that, we further move on to define the scope or the boundaries of the information security management system that will be defined. Clause 5 is leadership. Of course, I'll be explaining about each clause in the further slide, but here I'll give a short brief about each clause. So clause 5 is leadership, wherein the standard talks about what are the expectations of the standard from the top management of the organization. What a top management of the organization should do when they want their organization to implement information security management system and get the maximum benefits out of it. Clause 6 is about planning, wherein it talks about how. So if you see, the Jason had already presented the plan, do, check, act cycle, PDCA cycle of the ISO standard. So clause 6 is planning, wherein it talks about identifying what information to secure, what are the already measures that are already in place with the organization, and what needs to be done further. So all the planning happens in clause 6. Clause 7 is support. So as we plan how to define the information security management system for our organization, clause 7 further extends that. So whatever things that you have planned, what is the support or what are the supportive resources, competency, awareness, etc. are necessary to ensure that what we plan is executed properly. So clause 7 is about support. Clause 8 is about operations. This is the clause which is act section of the PDCA cycle, wherein the organization is actually supposed to do what it has planned and what it has taken support of various resources of as per clause 6 and 7. So clause 8 is wherein organization is actually supposed to do what they have planned to implement the information security management system. Clause 9. So if you see plan, do, check, plan, do, act, we've already done. Now, number 9 is clause 9 is performance. Performance is now whatever information security management system that an organization has defined. It is time to evaluate how it is performing, whether the management system that the organization has defined is performing effectively, or there are certain changes or modification improvements needs to be done to that management system to ensure that the organization gets the desired outputs or benefits from the management system. Clause 10 is improvement. So all the ISO standards, including ISO 27001, focuses on the clause 10 improvement. So all the ISO standards focus on the concept of continual improvement. Eh, that is once the organization is certified or has implemented the ISMS, that's not an end. The organization has to continually follow the plan, do, check, act cycle. That is, they have to continually keep on evaluating the performance of the management system, identify the scope for improvement, implement the measures that are identified under the scope of improvement, again check those improvement sections the implemented, and that's how the cycle goes on. So this is a high level structure of IEC 27001. Now let us understand the clause 4 to 10 a bit more in detail. These are the sub requirements of the clause 4 to 10 of the standard. Here, if you see clause 4, context of the organization. So as I mentioned in my earlier slide, clause 4 moreover talks about understanding the organization and the various factors that can affect the information security management system of that particular organization. So that is understanding the organization and its context. By context here, we mean what are the products and services of the organization, who all are the customers, which all are the regions where this organization is serving, what is the technology that an organization is using, the employee base of the organization, what all resources organization has already available with them, and what are the maybe security practices the organization is already following. These are the various factors which can be considered under understanding the organization and its context. Next is understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Now, why standard asking us to consider the needs and expectations of interested parties? By means of interested parties, we mean the parties that can get affected by the information security management system of an organization. Now, this could be the top management, this can be employee, this can be a third party service provider of an organization, this can be the customer of an organization, or this could also be the government or the regulatory authority of that particular a particular state, country, or region where the organization is operating. Their needs and expectations from the organization about information security management system is important to understand, because that is something can be a very good input for planning how to design your information security management system. Now, once we have understood the organization and its context, once we have understood the needs and expectation of interested parties, these two, basis on these two inputs, the organization is required to determine the scope of information security management system. By defining the scope here, we mean what all are the product and services for which the organization wants to implement information security management system, which all are the various business functions which the organization wants to be part of the implementation of this information security management system. That is maybe an operation function, HR function, delivery function, marketing function, or any other function which is customer support function. These are the various functions which could be part of the scope. It also includes identifying which locations to be included in the scope of the ISMS. That is, whether an organization wants to cover all only its head office into the certification or the implementation of ISMS, or it wants to cover all the head office and the various branches of the organization that it is operating out of. So this is the step where the top management and the responsible persons within the organization define what should be the scope or the boundaries of ISMS. And once the scope has been defined, the standard requires to document that scope and get the approval of the top management. So the scope must be formally documented and approved by the top management before we actually move on to the planning, implementation, and all the other phases of the ISMS. Next clause is leadership. As I mentioned, the clause states out certain requirements or certain expectations from the top management of the organization, which is supposed to implement the ISMS. That is, here the standard clearly requires an top management to demonstrate their leadership and commitment towards implementing information security management system. Now, how the management can demonstrate their commitment towards ISMS is by defining the information security management system policy. This is a organization wide policy wherein we can say it's kind of a vision statement, organization wide information security vision statement, wherein the top management is communicating to all the internal and external parties that what is the organization is trying to achieve by implementing this ISMS. So that is one of the requirement. Next is how in addition to that, the organization, the top management can also demonstrate their commitment by assigning responsibility to a clear responsibility within their organization to ensure that ISMS is defined, implemented, practiced, and continually improved as stated in as per the ISO 27001 requirement. So assignment of clear roles and responsibilities is another requirement which is from the top management of the organization. Other than this, so here we are only talking about the people resources, but other than this, the management also needs to ensure whatever process or technology related resources which are necessary for the implementation, maintenance of the ISMS are always available. Management is also required to periodically take a review of the implementation of the ISMS and evaluate the results of the performance of the information security management system. With this, I'll move on to clause 6, planning. Planning, as I mentioned, it talks about how to define the ISMS, what needs to be secured. Now, how to decide what needs to be secured? The beauty of ISO 27001 is it does not clearly state what information needs to be secured. The decision is clearly towards an organization to identify what information is critical to that organization, in what form it resides, where it is located, who all have access to it, and how to secure it. So, in the planning stage, the risk analysis is something a key feature of the standard, wherein the standard requires that perform an organization should perform a risk analysis on the various information and information assets that they are handling and identify what needs to be procured, what needs to be secured. It also requires, once the risk analysis has been done, a risk treatment plan needs to be developed. And in addition to that, every function which is part of the information security management scope must be assigned an objective, a clear security objective that states that what this each function is supposed to do for the defined period to ensure that they are contributing towards achievement of the information security policy or goal of an organization. This is clause 6. We'll go more in detail at a later stage. Next, I'll move on to clause 7, support. So as I mentioned earlier, the clause 7 support is more about what type of support is necessary to ensure that the ISMS which is planned by the organization is successfully implemented and gives the desired benefits. So the support, there are various factors which needs to be identified. That is, what resources are necessary. These resources could be in any form. It could be people, process, technology, or third party vendors, or any all other resources needs to be identified here. Competence, as I mentioned earlier, the management is supposed to clearly assign the responsibilities with respect to information security management system. So here in clause 7, the requirement is to identify whether the people who have been assigned the responsibility to do certain activities related to ISMS have necessary competence, and if not, then they are provided necessary awareness and training to ensure that they are competent enough to perform their responsibilities effectively to support to the information security management system. Communication is another requirement of the standard. So if you see, there are a lot of planning and implementation is going to happen when an organization decides to implement ISMS. So throughout this phase, or even after the ISMS is implemented and is in regular practice, there are a lot of communication which is going to happen. The communication could be about the changes in the policy, the communication could be about implementation of a new security measure or control, the communication could be about internal audits or the certification audits, the communication can be about the information security incidents, the change management, or any information security breach, all these communications, how these communications should happen. So a standard states certain requirements, that is what to communicate, who should communicate, with whom it needs to be communicated, how it needs to be communicated. A clear set of requirements are stated in the standard about how any communication with respect to information security management system should happen. Next is the documented information. So one of the uh, core requirement of the standard is there are certain set of documents which an organization must retain, or which must create, maintain, and retain periodically to provide adherence, to provide confidence that they are in compliance with the requirement of the standard. Also, they are in compliance with the requirement of the various security policies and procedures that they have defined as part of implementation of ISMS. So that is what the documented information we are talking about here. So this documented information, how it should be created, how it should be modified, how the version control should happen, how the changes in the documentation should be communicated, what should be the retention period, what are the mechanisms for the disposal of such documentation. All these requirements are stated in the clause 7 documented clause 7 support documented information. With this, I'll move on to operation, that is clause 8. Now, as I said, we planned the ISMS, we identified what all are the support mechanisms which are necessary for the ISMS that an organization has planned. Then it is time to actually implement the requirements or the ISMS that has been defined by the organization. Now, what exactly is the operation? So in clause 6, the organization actually defines how they will do the risk analysis, how they will identify what needs to be protected, and what is the level of risk acceptance, which all risks should be treated, and what should be an objective for various department, etc. In clause 8, the risk analysis to be actually performed by the organization by identifying various information and information assets and supporting assets which may hamper the security of an information. So the actual risk assessment is conducted in clause 8 operations. The results of risk assessments are evaluated. Organization is supposed to decide which all risks needs to be accepted, which all risks will be treated, which all risks will be transferred, and which all risks can be avoided. So these are the various things which are performed in clause 8 operations. The objectives which are defined for the various functions, this is the time wherein the various functions has actually need to start putting their efforts to achieve those objectives. As a result of the yes, Jason.
Yeah, there is there's someone who have raised his hand.
Oh, okay.
I think that is from Athena. Yeah, maybe Athena, you can ask your question.
Or Jason, I suggest we can, all the we especially have
Okay.
saved certain time for the
Okay.
Q&A session.
Okay.
I would request that please save your questions for the end of the
Okay.
session, and we'll surely answer
Okay.
all your queries.
Maybe before the break, because sometimes they
Yes,
really wanted to get those answers already. But of course, we were going to have
sure.
another Q&A before or at the end, before the end of the overview. Maybe before the or before the formal end, no? maybe you can save your questions and we will be happy to answer that. Okay, but in some instances, I'm already answering some of the questions on the chat box. Okay, maybe you can continue.
Yeah, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so clause 8. So I was talking about the results of clause 8. So result of clause 8, as Jason mentioned earlier, ISO has a set of 114 controls defined, right? So clause 8, as a result of clause 8, what happens is when the organization performs a risk analysis and they identify certain risks to their business, their information or various information assets, these are the 114 controls which will be a cure to this risk. That is, these are the controls which can be selected by the organization to treat or mitigate those risks. Okay, and as a result, what happens is a statement of applicability needs to be produced by the organization. Statement of applicability is nothing but a list of 114 controls of ISMS, and in front of each control an organization is supposed to mention whether the control is applicable to them or no. By applicability here I mean whether there is a risk exist or no with respect to that control within their organization, and if yes, if they have selected this control as a treatment to that risk. Okay, so whichever control that you select as a treatment to the risk that has been identified, the control becomes applicable to your organization. There is no mandate that all the 114 controls needs to be implemented. It is up to the organization which all controls are applicable, to identify which all controls are applicable, and if applicable then which all controls to implement and how to implement. Okay, that is about clause 8. We'll go more in detail at the later stages. I'll move on to clause 9, performance evaluation. So this is the check clause of the PDCA cycle, Plan, Do, Check Act. So we are at the check stage, performance evaluation. Here what happens is, now whatever that an organization has planned and implemented, it is time to check whether it is working effectively or no, because until and unless things are practiced in real, we may not know whether it is actually giving the desired benefits or no. So that is clause 9, performance evaluation. In this, the standard requires an organization to have a look at each and every control that has been accepted by the organization and implemented by the organization, and check whether it is giving desired results or no. Okay, so for example, earlier there was, so say antivirus is one of the control, malware protection is one of the control which an organization has selected for the implementation. Now how to check whether it is giving desired outputs or no? This can be checked by the organization may have a look at what was the number of malicious attacks that were happening before implementing this control, and whether these numbers have been reduced or no once the control was implemented, right? If the number is reduced, the control is working effectively and it can be continued. For some reason, if the number is still same or still increasing, the organization may need to relook upon the control and have a recheck about what needs to be done uh, to resolve the issue, right? That is about monitoring, measurement, analysis and evaluation. Next is internal audit. A standard requires an organization to perform an internal audit, that is a self-assessment of implementation of their information security management system, at least once in a year. The frequency can vary, but it should not exceed more than a year's timeline. By internal audit, we mean the self-assessment or the internal audit to be performed by the competent resources. If you see in clause 7, we talked about competence. So here the people who are going to conduct an internal audit should be competent enough, and if not, they should be given necessary training to ensure that they perform the internal audit effectively. So internal audit needs to be performed wherein, and all the scope, entire ISMS scope should be part of the internal audit, and then the results of the internal audit should be communicated to the top management. Next is the management review meeting. As I mentioned in the clause 5 about show management is required to show their leadership and commitment. So yes, a management is supposed to conduct a management review meeting wherein the responsible persons for ISMS should report the results of monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, or overall performance of the information security management system over a period of time to the management. It can be a results of risk assessment, it can be the status of the objectives which are assigned to various function, it can be the results of monitoring measurement which for various controls that has been performed. It can be the status of the various risk treatment plans that have been defined by the organization, or it can also be any change in relevant to the internal and external context of the organization. Okay, so all these things needs to be reported to the management periodically, not exceeding a year's timeline. Clause 10 is improvement. Now this is where the PDCA cycle continues. So again, we'll come back to plan. Once we do the improvement check, it will come back to plan. Now, what talks about improvement is non-conformity and corrective action. So as I mentioned, at least once in a year, the internal audit needs to be performed. So whatever are the findings of the internal audit, the non-conformities, a corrective action needs to be performed on those non-conformities. By what we mean by the corrective action? So corrective action is an action performed on the finding to ensure a similar non-conformity will not repeat in future. So for every non-conformity, organization needs to be identify its root cause, an immediate correction needs to be done, and then a corrective action needs to be defined to ensure similar non-conformity will not repeat. Next is continual improvement. So that's where we are again we'll go back to the plan. That is, now whatever are the results of the internal audit, what the decisions of management as part of management review meeting, status of the risk treatment plan, changes in the internal external context, status of achievement of the objective. The results of all this will give the action items for the next period, and once organization starts working back towards it, then it will move again back to the plan. So this all of these may require certain changes in the information security management system. So those changes again needs to be planned. That is, again we come back to clause 6. Again the necessary support for the planning to be identified. Again all those new measures needs to be implemented under operation, and then again all of those needs to be rechecked in the performance evaluation clause. So this is about clause 4 to 10. This is a core of the ISO 27001 2013 standard. So any organization who is planning to go for the certification, implementation of the clause 4 to 10 requirements is mandatory. The organization cannot skip any requirement which is stated explicitly in clause 4 to 10. Non-compliance to any of the requirements in the standard may affect the certification audit result. Okay. So this is clause 4 to 10. Next, I'll move to annexure A control. So as I mentioned, once an organization performs the risk analysis as a treatment to various risks, the organization is supposed to implement certain controls, right? So these are the various control areas, control domains, I would say. So these are various areas in which the ISMS has provided various controls. If you see, it varies across various domains: information security policies, how information security is organized, human resource security, asset management, access control and managing user access, cryptographic technology, physical security, operation security. So these are the various control areas. Under A5 information security policy, the standard requires an organization to define the set of information security policies and procedures which the organization will be following. Okay, so this is actually the do part. What exactly needs to be done is to be defined in the information security policies and procedures. These policies and procedures should be communicated to all the internal and external relevant parties, right? So like for the employee should be aware about what are the information security policies and procedures. That is one of the example. Also A6 is how information security is organized. It talks about maintaining contacts with the various authorities and special interest groups, etc. A7 is human resource security. This control area specifically focus on the risk to the information that may come by means of people resources. So what are the measures to be taken when onboarding an employee, when an employee is terminated or is has resigned, throughout his employment, what needs to be done, what kind of an awareness needs to be done, what kind of a disciplinary action to be defined in case of an information security breach happens, what is the management expectation from the employees towards the information security. All these controls are covered in A6. A7, sorry. A8 is asset management. So as we know, the organization uses various assets to create information, to store information, to process information, etc. So how all these assets needs to be safeguarded to ensure there is no information, there is no threat to the information with this by means of these assets. So this covers various aspects such as maintaining an asset inventory, mobile devices security, teleworking, classification, labeling, handling of the assets. All those are covered in this. A9 is access control and managing user access. So this does not only focuses on access to information, this focuses on the access to softwares, access to networks by any means, or access to mobile devices by any means. An employee or any personnel can get access to the information. So this has various controls like defining an access control policy, how the accesses to be mapped, to be provisioned, how to handle the special privileged accesses like administrative accesses, etc. Those areas are covered in E9, access controls and managing user access. A10 is cryptographic technology. So this area majorly focuses on when an organization has implemented certain cryptographic techniques to encrypt the information, critical information that they possess. So this is about cryptographic technology. A11 is physical security of the organization sites and equipment. So why physical security is taken into consideration here is because the information, the location from which the people are working, the location at which the various assets which store, process, transmit the information are located, it is very important to safeguard that location. It is also very important to ensure secure working environment to the employees. It is also important to to be secured from the external threats or natural calamities or environmental threats. So all these security controls are covered in A11 of the standard. A12 is operation security. Here it is talking about defining policies and procedures for various operational activities which are performed by the organization. It could be patch management, it could be change management, it could be a regular departmental operational procedures. So these are all covered under operational security. A13 is secure communications and data transfer. This is more about network security, like the infrastructure that an organization has set up, how that infrastructure can be safeguarded, what all other various controls. It talks about the clock synchronization, network security, access to network and network services, critical information passing through the networks, how to safeguard that. All those controls are covered in A30. A14 is secure acquisition, development, and support of information system. So it talks about whatever softwares, etc., or information systems which are used, developed by the organization, how to safeguard those to ensure there is no threat to the information which is flowing through or created or stored in those information systems or applications. So it has guidelines to ensure what precautions to be taken while acquiring a third party software, what precautions or measures to be implemented while developing an internal applications or application for your customers. And it also has certain controls to ensure, to identify how to control risks related to uh, outsourcing of certain development activities for the applications. A15 is security for suppliers and third parties. That is, any organization has has a set of third parties which are helping them to provision their product and services to their customers, or to serve their internal customer, that is an employee. For example, an organization may have a background verification check vendor, a telecommunication vendor, a physical security service provider, or any other service providers. So all these service providers or cloud service providers. So what are the controls to ensure there is no threat to information with respect to the third party service while acquiring or while working with the third party service provider? So this talks about ensuring the confidentiality agreements are signed with the third party service provider, ensuring their performance is evaluated on a periodic basis, ensure the SLAs are monitored, right? Ensure how the changes to the suppliers are handled. All these controls are covered under A15, security for suppliers and third party. A16 is incident management. This talks about, so see, no matter how much we plan, how much extensively an organization performs risk analysis, how extensively the controls are implemented, there is something which can happen as as a surprise, right? As a not so good surprise, I would say, which is an incident. So how to deal with an incident, how to make your employees, your customer aware about how to identify the incident, what is an incident, if an incident happens, what to do, whom to report, what is an immediate action can be taken, how to report an incident, how to document an incident, how to investigate the incident, how to close once the incident is closed, what is the learning from that incident. All those controls are covered under A16, incident management. A17 is business continuity and disaster recovery. So please note, this control does not talk about an entire business continuity aspect. This talks only the business continuity aspects of information security management system, because business continuity altogether is a different standard, is a different set of requirements which an organization should be implemented for the entire organization. Here the standard only talks about how do you ensure information security when there is a situation like business continuity or disaster occurs. Okay, so that is A17. That it talks about defining a business continuity plan, testing the business continuity plan, assigning the responsibilities for the business continuity, that is covered in A17. A18 is compliance. So while performing your day-to-day business activities, while serving customers with various products and services, an organization needs to adhere to various compliance requirements. It could be legal and statutory requirements. It could be the protection of intellectual property rights, that or in the form of any software or anything that the organization is using. It could be a trademark that organization has filed or something. So all these compliance requirements, the controls towards these compliance requirements are defined in A18. So this is the summary of the Annexure A controls which are give provision by the standard. Please note, an implementation of all these controls are not mandatory. This is solely depends on whether there is any risk that exists for which any of these controls can be selected as a treatment. So basis on the applicability towards to the organization, the controls can be selected by the organization for the implementation. The justification for inclusion or exclusion of the control is documented in the statement of applicability document that I mentioned in the previous slide. For example, any organization who is not involved in the software development activities, certain controls under A14 will not be applicable to that organization. So justification for that can be mentioned in the statement of applicability. With this, I'll move to the next slide.
Miss Akshita, excuse me.
Yes, Luz.
Yes.
Yes.
Can we have a 5 minutes break first before we
Sure,
proceed?
we can. Yes,
Okay
yes.
then. So everyone, we can have our 5 minutes break for the meantime. We will be back at exactly 3:13, 3:40, 3:15. Let's make it 3:15. And to those who have questions, you can now have your questions ready. Send it to the chat box so that the panelists could go through it and provide you answers during the question and answer part later. Thank you. We can restart now. Miss Akshita.
Yes, Luz.
Yes. So maybe we will just give 1 more minute for everyone to be back and we will resume.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And thank you
Thank you.
for that wonderful presentation earlier. Sorry, I cut you off right away.
No problem. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Everyone, are we all good for now? We will resume our discussion. Miss Akshata will continue with what she is sharing. Thank you so much. Miss Akshata, you can take the floor again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as we have now had a before the break, let's have a quick recap. We had a understanding on the structure of the ISO 27001 2013. After that, we understood the various mandatory requirements of the standard, that is clause 4 to 10, and a short brief about each of the clause, what are its expectations of the standard from each of the clause. Post which we had an overview of the various control areas or control domains of ISMS, and what exactly each of the area covers, which all controls each of the area covers that we had looked upon. Now I'll start with the key features of the information security management system. So, if you all could recollect, while Jason was giving an introduction on the information and information security, he mentioned about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That is the core pillars of the core concepts of the information security. In addition to this, the ISO IEC 27001 2013, it is also considering the people, process, technology, the three pillars of any organization, into the consideration while defining the requirements of the information security management system. So overall, the standard is based upon confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information, which is in accordance with the people, process, technology aspect. So this is a short brief again on the CIA. So confidentiality is nothing but ensuring that information is accessible only to those who are authorized to have access to that information. Integrity is safeguarding the accuracy and completeness of information and its processing methods. And availability is ensuring that authorized users have access to information and associated assets as and when required. So why to consider people, process, and technology? So people are something which who we are, that is who use or interact with the information. That is the reason they must be taken into consideration. Process is what we do, that is the repeatable steps which are performed by the people within an organization to accomplish the objectives of the business, that is say product manufacturing or service delivery of an organization. Technology is what we use to what we do, that is what people use to do those repeatable steps to accomplish business objectives with the help of this technology, that is various softwares, devices, like even your laptop, the softwares installed into it, the various machines to manufacture certain products, the infrastructure, it could be a physical infrastructure or network infrastructure. All these mechanisms are necessary to consider into information security management system. So who we are, what we do, and what we use to what we do. People, process, technology should work hand in hand with the three core concepts of information security management system, that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, to ensure information is not at risk. Now, another feature of information security management system that I would like to brief about is about its applicability. Now, if you all are aware about various security standards in the industry, they focus on certain. They have a defined boundaries of the applicability. For example, PCI DSS is applicable to an organization who is dealing with the cardholder data, right? Store, process, transmit. HIPAA is applicable to an organization who is dealing with the health information. GDPR is applicable to an organization who is dealing with the privacy information of EU region, right? So every standard has defined its own boundaries of applicability. The beauty of information security management system ISO 27001 is that it can be implemented by, or it is applicable to any organization who thinks that the information that they have has certain value to their organization, and the compromise of that information can cause certain negative impacts to the organization in terms of financial loss, loss of confidence of the customers, or impact to the brand name of the organization, or it could be any other negative impact. So any organization of any size, any complexity, working out of any region, any number of employees, can implement information security management system if they want to protect the information that they possess and to avoid any negative impacts of information threat or breach. So if you see, the organization of any complexity, where or any size or any level of risk, low, medium, high level of risk, can implement information security management system. Next feature I'll move on to is the risk analysis. Risk analysis is the key feature of the ISO IC 27001. It requires an organization to perform a risk analysis and identify the risks that they have to their information by themselves. So there are no standard set of risk which needs to be followed while implementing ISMS. Each organization, basis on their complexity, basis on their operations, basis on their structure of the organization, various functions that they have within their organization, can or may be exposed to various risks. No organization has a similar set of risks that they will be facing. So a standard has given us defined guidelines to perform a risk analysis for each organization which is implementing an ISMS, identify their own risk, define a risk treatment plan as per the organization's risk appetite and the management decision, and then perform a risk treatment and apply various controls. So here, if you see, another key feature here is that an organization has got a full freedom to decide what to protect, how to protect, right? And what measures to implement. So, risk analysis, the standard requires to perform an organization to do the risk analysis at least once in a year, whenever any significant security incident occurs, and whenever there is any critical change to the business affecting information security. For example, since this COVID impact or COVID situation started, and if, the major change happened in majority of the organization is employees started working from home. This is a major change to the context of the organization, the ISMS of the organization, wherein certain additional controls needs to be implemented by the organization to ensure information security when employees are not at office but working from home. Certain existing controls might have required to be modified by those organizations. So in such cases, the organizations who are certified already might will need to perform a risk analysis once again and identify the status of various risks that the organization is exposed to as on the current COVID situation. It also requires an organization to establish risk acceptance criteria as well as the definition of how this risk will be measured. That is, here again, the organization has a privilege to decide what is their risk appetites or risk acceptance criteria, which risk an organization can accept. They can do away with this. No implementation of control is necessary. They can put some minimum measures to ensure the risk is not materializing. But however, even if it materializes, the negative impact is comparatively less, so the organization can accept those risks. So organization has a privilege to decide the risk acceptance criteria, and also the definition of how this risk will be measured. That is, an organization can decide which risk will fall under low category, which risk will fall under critical, high, medium category, etc. The potential consequences of identified risk as well as their likelihood and level of impact need to be assessed. So every time the risk is identified, it need not be a situation that the risk is currently into the organization. No, that may be a potential risk. So for such kind of a risk, an organization need to assess what are the chances this risk can materialize. If the risk is materializes, then what is the potential level of impact that risk can cause? Basis on that, the organization can decide which risk to be accepted and which risk to be put under the high, medium, low category. The standard requires that the results of the risk assessment must be reported to the management in the management review meeting periodically. So the results of risk assessment, so especially the risk which are critical or high, should be reported to the management in the management review meeting, wherein any support required from the management as part of the implementation of the risk treatment plan can be requested during that management review meeting. For example, certain additional controls to be implemented which involve certain budgetary constraint, time constraints, or infrastructure requirements. So those approvals, permissions can be taken from the management in the management review meeting. Or any risk which needs to be accepted, the risk acceptance of should be approved by the management. All these discussions happen in the management review meeting. Next feature is the top management commitment. Why is this a feature? Is because this standard assigns a very clear responsibility to the top management itself, that what they are supposed to do to give a clear to show their commitment towards implementation of the information security management system. Demonstration of commitment to the information security management system is a formal responsibility which the standard has assigned to the leadership members of an organization. Organization leaders or top management can demonstrate the commitment by ensuring that information security policy is defined, all resources and responsibilities for implementation, management, and continual improvement of the management system are available and allocated. These are not just the two pointers. In various stages, the management can demonstrate their leadership, like by participating in the management review meeting, by participating in the risk in the evaluation of the risk assessment results, by assigning in business objectives for towards information security, by communicating the importance of the information security management system to the employees or to the customers or the external interested parties of an organization. Next key feature is definition of goals and strategies. The organization is required to be very clear about what are its information security goals and what strategies will be established to achieve those goals. These goals needs to be documented clearly with the details such as what will be done, what resources will be required, who will be responsible, when it will be completed, and what results will be evaluated. I'm my sincere apologies for the typing error at the last statement. So, what do you mean by definition of goals and strategies? So, we discussed in the clause 6 about assigning the objectives to the various functions, right? So, that is nothing but the objectives or the goals which needs to be defined and implemented by the various functions which are in the scope. Key features of ISMS, resources and competencies. This is all about the preparation of the organizations before implementing the information security management system. The organization must also ensure that all the resources needed not only for implementation but also for system maintenance are available. In addition, it is necessary to establish what the necessary skills are and to make sure that the persons responsible are qualified enough even with the supporting documentation. Awareness about the information security management system is another critical requirement of the standard and a key feature, wherein it is a core requirement of the standard that each and every information security policy, procedures, or relevant documentation must be made available to all the employees which are part of the scope. An information security policy should be clearly communicated to all the relevant parties. It could be employees, your service provider, your customers, so that they understand what the organization is trying to achieve via this management system, and what are the do's and don'ts, or what are the steps to be followed while performing certain set of responsibilities which they are assigned to. Communication. Standard understands that communication is the key. So this is a little practical aspects of the implementation, wherein we are planning what to do, we have defined certain set of policies, procedures, etc. But until and unless they are clearly communicated, and clearly communicated, they will not be followed in practice and they may not give the clear result. Other than this, any communication or any instance happening around information security should be communicated effectively. Now, how to do this effective communication is standard requires to identify what communication, on what situation the communication needs to be done, when to communicate, with whom needs to be communicated, who shall communicate, and the process by which the communication shall be effected. For example, if there is an external certification audit is going to happen, so how that communication should go, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, who shall communicate, and the process by which it should be communicated. So if there is any incident that has happened, so how the communication related to that incident should follow. So these are the guidelines which standard has given for the organizations who are implementing ISMS. Documenting the information. So, as you all must be aware that any certification assessment or any compliance assessment happens on the concept that you do what is documented and you document what you are doing, right? So there has to be a perfect balance between the documentation and the practices which are being followed within an organization with respect to that particular compliance requirement. So the standard requires to maintain documented information required by the standard. For example, the scope must be documented, information security policy must be documented, statement of applicability must be documented, risk assessment activity must be documented, internal audit results must be documented, minutes of management review meeting must be documented. So these are the various documented requirements of the standard. B is documented information determined by the organization as being necessary for the effectiveness of the ISMS. Now, what is it? For example, one of the organization policies says policy says that the background verification check for the employees must be performed, right? Sorry. So the documentation, the background verification check reports of each of the employee must be retained as a supporting evidence. That is what we mean by point B here. The identification, format, review, and approval of this document is a must. That is, every document which is part of your information security management system should have or must have the review, approval, revision history, should also have a clear classification mentioned onto the document, that is whether it's a public, restricted, internal, or confidential document, etc. And every change with respect to that document should follow a change description policy. All these documents must be effectively controlled. Now, by controlled, what we mean is the distribution of these documents, the access to this document, the retrieval, storage, preservation, control of changes, retention period, and disposition procedures for all these documents and records must be followed or must be defined by the organization. Another key feature is is tracking the performance. So standard emphasizes on conducting an internal audit, evaluating the performance of the various controls so that the organization has implemented to track the performance of information security management system. The performance of the management system can be tracked by means of achievement of information security objectives defined at relevant function levels, status of the risk treatment plan, that is how many of the risk has already been treated, which how many risk treatments are still in progress, etc. The results of the internal audit, that is what all are the non-compliances, in which area are those non-compliances, are the non-compliances coming are repetitive. All this can be used to track the performance. And then measurement of performance of controls applied. Improvement. This is another feature of the ISMS wherein the standard requires an organization to identify the various areas of improvements by means of handling the non-conformities. So non-conformities are the area, are the clear clear signs of what needs to be improved with respect to information security management system, where the organization's ISMS implementation is lacking. Continually improve the suitability, adequacy, effectiveness of the ISMS. That is, as I mentioned earlier, once the any organization implements an ISMS, gets certified with the ISMS, it's not the end of the story. The organization has to continually practice the policies, procedures, and the set of guidelines defined under ISMS, continually keep a track on various risks to the business, various risks that may possess to the business, and continually keep on defining various set of goals and objectives and keep working towards it, and then at the end again track the performance by means of conducting the internal audits and various measurement activities. Another feature is compatibility with other security standards, legal or regulatory requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, with respect to applicability of the standard, this the any organization handling any sort of information, they may be, it may be a personal information, it may be a cardholder data, it may be an health related information, or it may be any other information. It may be an information simply about their product and services, right? uh, if they feel that that is critical and the threat and the compromise of that information is affecting them badly, then they can simply implement the ISMS standard. And while any organization is implementing an ISMS, they may automatically certain percentage, like I won't say 100%, but yes, at least 60 to 70% they will automatically get compliant with the other such standards, because the other standards are also at some level focusing on the three concepts, that is confidentiality, integrity, availability of information security, and the people process technology. So even other standards are also focused on these areas. However, the only difference is they focus on certain category of information to be protected. But when an organization is implementing ISMS, it will end up identifying all the critical information to be protected, and then certain percentage of compliance will automatically will be achieved by that organization to the other compliance requirements that they may have to implement. The standard, the annexure A controls that we reviewed, it has various controls that can be implemented across people process technology. For example, at people level, okay, the headlines got mixed up. So at the people level, we got training, awareness, HR policies, background checks, roles and responsibilities, uh, you know, uh, acceptable use, performance management, etc. At the process level, we got risk management, asset management, data classification, data leak prevention, change management, patch management, etc. And at the technology level, we have system security, IDS, IPS, data center, vulnerability assessment. So various technology related controls that can be implemented. With this, I would request Jason to continue with the benefits of adopting to ISO IC 27001.
Okay, so to continue, so there are certain benefits of this ISO 27 or the ISMS. So of course, number one, this is actually an internationally recognized standard, no? Anywhere in the world, for example, for those 165 countries, no, if you are actually belonging to the 165 countries, of course, your certification will always be acceptable as a legitimate certified certificate or a legitimate certificate. Okay, and hello,
Yes, we can hear you, Jason.
yeah, I cannot see the presentation. Of course, since just to verbalize about it, since the high level, since the ISO 27 is actually based on high level. A while ago, there was this question about high level structure, and why is it similar? The clauses is in a way similar to the clauses of other standard like 9014 because they have implemented a high level structure, and it will be easier for you to, for example, if you have a if you are already certified to other standard, it will be easier for you to be certified to ISO 27000 because of their similarities, no? Although there are certain requirements of the ISO 27001 that you need to really implement, such as in the Annex A, there are many requirements that you need to implement specifically for ISMS. Okay. Hello.
Jason, just go ahead, please. Akshata is having a technical issue with.
Okay. Okay. And then, of course, after implementation of this, no, when it comes to legal and regulatory compliances, no, that is actually one of the requirements of the ISO 27001. In some of the requirements, of course, there are certain specific laws in each country that we need to follow in terms of ISO 27, in terms of legal or information. But under the ISO 27001, because it also states legal and regulatory requirement compliance, you will always be obliged to follow certain specific legal and statutory requirements in your respective country as part of the compliance to ISO 27. No, it manages and minimizes risk exposure as stated in certain controls or the controllable elements or as defined in Annex A. It will always be minimized. No, yeah. Of course, commercial credibility and confidence and assurance. The ISO 27001 always follow no an international accreditation forum time Monday calculation. No, when I speak of monthly calculation, when we actually audit you based on certain standards, any ISO will always follow that specific table. So it will always be commercially credible. So we cannot audit you, or you will always be assured that you will not be audited based on what if they want to add more monthlies or etc. Okay, of course, it enhances customer satisfaction and of course protects your organization's assets, the shareholders, information, and of course the customers. Okay, next slide. So after learning all of these requirements, like example the clause 4 to 10 and the annex requirements from 5 to 18, what will now be the next step for every company to how are we going to be certified? Well, that's the big question. How are we going to be certified after implementing those requirements and analyzing also those information that we need to declare? No? Okay, next slide.
Jason, sorry to bother you.
Yeah.
You are on the benefits slide, right?
Yes, the next slide, sir, is yeah. So there's the oops, one slide before
One
this
before, yeah, 40.
certification. Yeah, yeah. Okay, this one. So this one I had mentioned a while ago. It will be enhanced the customer satisfaction because of the adoption of the 27001. Better adoption to changes since all information is documented and management is optimized. And of course, as mentioned a while ago, ensure business continuity, actually not only continuity, but resiliency in terms of certain incidents or challenges that the company might in the near future be experiencing. Tailored policies and standard procedures and guidelines because of certain requirement as mentioned in Annex A. Okay, next slide. So this is the next big question. How are we going to be certified? No, so let me discuss the certification process. Okay, so first, of course, after documenting all of those informations or documented information that are complying to the requirement of the standards, we need to implement that. No, as stated in the standard, we need to implement and maintain. So implementation is a big step because we cannot actually have a system if we are not going to implement that. So there is a certain number of days, for example, that you need to implement such system before it can be actually be audited externally or even audited internally. So as a minimum, it can be actually 90 days. A 3-month period is actually effective. And then you will now going to go to the next step of having or conducting an internal audit. No? Because you need to check as mandated by the Plan Do Check and Act, or and of course as stated in the requirement of Clause 9, an internal audit is very important for you to be able to check the effectiveness of your ISMS, no? Whether it is complying with the ISMS policy or the ISMS objectives, or even the scope of the ISMS is actually being implemented. We're also going to assess with significant information that needs to be reflected in the management review. No? And then you need to maintain, you need to document the meeting minutes of this management review. It is actually in under clause 9. And you will also, once you have managed to finish this, no, of course, having a management review, it means also you have managed to implement a risk treatment plan, a risk assessment, and etc. Then you are going to select a certification body. Of course, it will be QRC. And prior to stage 1, no, as mentioned a while ago, once you have implemented your system, once you have finished conducting an internal audit and a management review, etc., and managed to correct certain items that has not been corrected because of certain issues that was identified during the internal audit, then you can now go to stage 1 assessment. This is already a responsibility of a third party or certification body like such as QRC for ISO 27001 to assess your company. We were going to look into the readiness of the organization for stage 2. So during stage 1, documentation will be reviewed. If the requirements of the ISMS was complied, if the annexes are complied, if the statement of applicability is actually being complied or implemented as well, or if there are certain exclusions that you have mentioned in your system that was excluded, but you need to justify that. Now, once you are already complied with that, including local requirements, no, per country needs to be complied during stage 1. No, legality of the organization also needs to be complied. Like in the Philippines, we do have certain requirements that is mandated by the government. No, once you comply with that, now we can now go to stage 2. But in case that there will be some items that needs to be corrected, so you will be given enough grace period for you to close that issue or that observation. Normally, we don't give an unconformity during stage 1, but only observation for you to be able to correct that within 90 days grace period, but not to exceed a 6 months grace, 180 days. No? Once, for example, because of certain urgency, you have managed to close an issue or findings or an observation that was raised during stage one. Now we will going to assess if that certain closure is already acceptable, and we will going to proceed with stage two. No, now during stage two, this is actually the main audit, no, or the certification audit. We call it certification audit, where we will going to audit your company based on a stated audit plan. And this stated audit plan will be actually given to you in advance, just like what we did normally for stage one. And especially now that there is already an acceptable virtual percentage audit. No, it means that there are certain audits that can be executed during stage one virtually, and there are certain mandates that can be executed for stage two virtually, but not to extend an 80% mandates or 80% of the total perform that needs to be performed on site. No, so that is that's the reason why this certain ruling was also issued last year because of the ISO response to the COVID-19. For example, in case that your company passed the stage two audit, you have managed to, for example, implement effectively. Again, the requirement is effectively the ISMS. Then there will be a smooth release of the certificate. So, but of course, the auditor will going to prepare an audit report recommending that the company is actually complying with all the requirements of the standard. But in certain cases that you will going to receive a minor or a major nonconformity or even an observation, but of course, major and minor nonconformity needs to be closed within 90 days grace period, not to extend within 90 days grace period, especially for major nonconformity because of the review of the effectiveness within 1 month period. So then we will going to recommend again the company that you are be able to release a certificate, no? But this will be initially given to our headquarters, which is in India, and then once confirmed, then we will going to give you the certificate. So in certain cases, that there will be some situation that the company does have some, for example, difficulty in implementing certain closure of an NC. So normally it will always be discussed to the auditor on how you are going to for example, to close that. So that will be executed during the first year. Now the stage one and stage two. Now, since the certificate that will be given to you is valid for 3 years, you will always be audited annually. So that is why there is this continual improvement or surveillance audit. We call it surveillance audit or surveillance assessment, an annual surveillance assessment. So this is the same thing that we will always going to give you ahead of time, an audit plan. And but of course, for surveillance audit, it will always be lesser. No, it will be lesser than the lesser mandates, lesser areas to be audited because you are already certified, and lesser than the stage two. And for the next 3 years, no, on the third year, that will now be your second surveillance audit. In the IAF or International Accreditation Forum, normally it is only stated that there will only be first surveillance audit and second surveillance audit. If in case that the company would like to have more surveillances, then it will be discussed to the certification body. Okay. Questions?
So we can proceed with the Q&A now.
So we can,
Okay.
okay, thank you so much, everyone. We can now proceed to the Q&A. So Jason, please take over. Thank you.
Okay, so let me read all those questions in the chat box. So one is which area are assessed in information security management systems. So I think I already answered this a while ago. All areas needs to be assessed as long as there are information that is considered confidential It's actually based on the scope. No? So another question is ISO 27000 version 2013 mandatory requirement for any kind of company? Actually, I answered all of also this one. It is actually voluntary certification, although sometimes there are certain companies that are requiring that to be, a certain company needs to be certified based on, it is actually sometimes based on customer requirement. Or sometimes there are certain incidents that needs to be addressed or prevented. That's why they are requiring you to have an ISO 27001. I know you that the structure of the ISMS is quite similar to ISO 9001 2015. What is significance difference between the two? Yes, actually, I think I have answered this a while ago. Because of ISO's implementation of a high-level structure, so they have managed to make it similar. You know, the ISO 9001, the 14001, the 45001, 22,000, 27,001, etc. That's why it's similar because of the high-level structure. Of course, the difference is that when we write a scope, it is more specific to an ISMS or information security. Aside from that, the ISO 27001 have certain annex, no? There are certain annex that are actually needs to be complied, which is very specific to IT or technology based, like, such as, for example, there are certain compliances that you need to implement. There are certain information security reviews that you need to implement, or some technical compliances that are only allotted for ISO 27001. Partner, do you want to answer some questions as well? About the standards and accreditations that the organization can keep and use stay safe from cyber attacks.
Ms.
Okay.
Akshata is currently answering some questions in the chat box.
Okay. So actually, because of the annex requirement, no, there are certain requirements that you need to implement, like firewalls, the patches that needs to be updated, no, and certain of course, yung virus that you need that will be implemented, certain antivirus that needs to be implemented to your server or to your companies, and certain cryptographic controls that needs to be implemented. That is why most probably cyber attacks will be prevented. But it doesn't state that it will be free from cyber attacks, no, but it will mostly be prevented. Is ISO 27001 certification can be used for data privacy? Yes, in a way, because actually what I mentioned a while ago here, specifically in the Philippines, and in some areas, like for example, in Singapore, which I have numerous audits, the Data Privacy Act of the Philippines and Singapore is somehow related to the GDPR. And in those certain requirements, it really does answer some data privacy requirement. That's why,
Correct.
in a
Jason,
way, yeah.
yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I would like to put some more light onto this question. So
Okay.
there is another ISO standard available, ISO 27701, which is an extension to ISO 27001 to cover the privacy requirements as well. So in addition to confidentiality, integrity, availability, it also covers the privacy aspects of it. The structure of that standard remains same as per ISO 27001. Even annexure A controls remain same. It's just that it puts more light on what additional things needs to be done to take care of the privacy aspects of the information as well. Jason, you may continue. Yeah, there is another question. Do we need to have a
Okay.
certified CISO in our organization in order to pass ISMS? No. So there is no clear guideline in the standard that the CISO must be mentioned. The standard talks about assigning responsibility to ensure ISMS is implemented and followed as per the standard guideline. It may be called as a management representative, it can be called as a CISO, it can be called as anything else, but there is no clear guideline on to that it has to be a certified CISO person. Next question. I do not see any more questions. Jason, could you?
Okay, the next question is in conducting risk assessment, are there other tools can be used aside from process failure mode, effect analysis, the PIMEA? I think there are, this is only one as tool, not in answering a risk analysis. There are many tools that can be implemented as long as your assets can be identified, your information, especially your information can be identified also. And of course, there are certain risk treatment that needs to be implemented. The requirement of the standard that need under clause 6 and of course some portion under clause 8 needs to be complied with, then it will be acceptable. Is there any prerequisite prior to ISO 27001? No, to be honest about it, honestly, no. As long as you will going to comply with the requirements, like documentation requirements of 27001, the annex requirement of the 27001, the clause 4 to 10 needs to be complied, then there is. Another question, have you tried using instant 27001? Maybe you can enlighten me of the instant 27001. I don't know the instant 27001. In my 14 years of auditing, what's instant 27001? Okay, there is this. I haven't seen this, but maybe if I'm going to, just like any doctor, once I've seen the system, then I can be able to give you an honest opinion if this is okay or not. No, but as of now, since this is an open forum, I cannot answer it immediately, but I can email you. If you can send me your email, then I can email you. Other questions? Okay. Do we need to have a certified CISO? This, I think this was already answered. Okay. Okay. I think those are all the questions. But if you have other questions, you can always email us. I have written down my email address on how in case you have question. Yeah.
Yes, we have one more
There is
question.
another one.
HIPAA versus ISO 27001 in the hospital industry, which one to follow? If you go with the domain specific standard, because the hospital industry, if you're dealing with the health specific information, then HIPAA clearly becomes the direct applicable standard, which can be requested, which can be a regulatory compliance requirement. ISO 27001, of course, can be implemented, but yes, HIPAA may take a precedent in terms of the direct applicability or legal or regulatory or customer requirements, compliance requirements.
Akshata, I think there is another open question from
Okay.
Randy Rolda. It is, do you offer a certain SaaS CAAS thing, compliance
As a service.
as a service, so there will be less work in our organization? So
we do offer compliance as a service, but not for ISO 27001, because being a certification body, we are not allowed to perform any advisory or such related services, because that may be a conflict of interest.
Interest, yes, correct. Another question, is it a requirement to have a physical office in the Philippines for an on-site audit? To be honest, because ISO 27 is site specific, so it means yes, if the scope includes Philippines. What will be your recommendation in terms of implementation requirement? I need to understand the scope on how you will going to be implementing the ISO 27 or 9001. But again, we can only give you opinion, but not to the extent of helping you implement the system.
Yes, it is possible to implement both together and take certification together, because as I mentioned during the presentation, both the standards being related to ISO, they follow the similar structure, right? Of course,
Yes.
The requirements, some requirements may differ. For example, ISO 27000 focuses on information security and 9001 focuses on process improvements, and customer satisfaction. However, the mandatory clause 4 to 10 that we discussed during the webinar, and like defining the scope, understanding the context, conducting internal audit, management review meeting, defining objectives, such requirements remain same. Only the do part, the clause 8 operations, that is something is
Different.
different in ISO 27001 and 9001. But yes, an organization who wants to go for the certification of both the standards, they can surely implement both the standards together. That would definitely save time, efforts, etc. And even if basis on the certification body that the organization selects, this assessment can also be done together.
Actually, we call it in an integrated management system type of audit, wherein when we conduct an assessment, the team leader needs to be certified to 27 and 9001 as lead auditor to be able to assess you. Can you provide
Uh,
further consultation with ISO 27? I think we have already answered this. We cannot do consultation for, since this is a we are certifying body.
there
um,
is there is
is
there is
it?
one element.
Yes.
There is one question that has come on the chat rather than the question and answer. So it is asking if you can further provide consultation in ISO 27000, and I'm responding to it. We are the certification body, and hence
Yeah, we cannot.
we cannot provide consultation. However, we can provide an open training program,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
which anybody and everybody can attend. Yeah. Uh, I see another question from Sherwin. Sorry, Sherwin, that you had to submit this question twice. The question is it a requirement to have a physical office in the Philippines for an on-site audit? Uh,
Yes. I think I
can I
have.
take the question, or Sir Jason, would you like to answer this?
Actually, sir, I think I have already answered that. Yes, and because ISO 27000 is site specific, and of course, since for example, if the scope needs to have you need to have an office in the Philippines, and there are certain activities in the Philippines that you will going to undergo for processing certain scope of the ISMS. But then yes, it will be required for you to have a on-site office here.
I mean, is the question that the certification body should have an physical office, or the customer should have a physical office?
I think the customer, sir. I think the customer
Customer.
they
If that is the point, then yes, there has to be a physical office, because otherwise, in the certificate we actually mention the name of the legal entity which is getting certified.
correct. Yeah,
So I
correct.
think yes. So that is answered.
We need to have a certified CISO. I think this was already answered.
If there are any more questions, please send your questions to the chat box so that our panelists could answer. Thank you.
Okay, I think they are shy. Okay, so is there any other question? Okay, so I think right, Luz, that's the end of our presentation.
Yep.
And if in case that you have further question, you can write. I think there are slide or sorry.
Ravi shared a message though.
Okay, okay.
Yep. So far so good. Like all questions have been answered already. So maybe we can conclude the webinar and just
Okay.
inform everyone that you can easily reach out to us for any further clarifications or questions. The team will always be here to assist you guys, and we will also get in touch with you soon. And also, we will be providing a certificate for this webinar to those who completed the session successfully. So, is there anything else that you would like to add, Jason?
Yes, in behalf of QRC Assurance and Solutions for Philippine Operation, thank you very much for attending this webinar for ISO 27001. I think some of you I already know, but most of you maybe I've met in some of the meetings. And in case that you have questions or queries about certifications on how you will be certified to ISO 27001, we will be happy to assist you. Just email us or call us. Thank you very much for attending this webinar.
Thank you so much, everybody, for
Yes,
attending
thank you,
this webinar.
everyone.
It has
Yep.
been our pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thank you, QRC team, for being all here. We're all full force for today. So this is the end of our webinar, and we will get in touch with you all. And we will be sending a feedback form later for us to know how to improve our services better. We thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
weekend. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
care.
everyone.
Joanne. Special mention. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.